Okay, I've got Gary Reichert here with me today. And Gary, thanks for joining the Malibu Guru podcast.
Well, thanks, Joe. And pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, we're sort of trying a new where we're distant, but yet we're getting better at trying new stuff. And today we had your recurrent training scheduled, but today there's a big, gigantic weather system that's out over the central United States, and I'm talking about a big one. We this is a system that encompasses probably, I don't know, 8 states. I'm looking at a radar screen, and this goes all the way up into, gosh, it's almost into Canada now, with a huge comma-shaped weather pattern that has the weather that's presently over our neck of the woods in Texas.
hmm
And of course, I live in Lufkin, Texas, and you live in the Sugar Land, which is just a small town outside of Houston, Texas. So southwest Houston, I guess you'd probably say, is where you live.
That's right. Yeah. Based out of Sugar Land, we've tried a couple of airports around the Houston area, but Sugar Land is where we've been most recently. And it's a great airport and, under the Class B shelf, but we've enjoyed kind of flying in and around the greater Houston land area.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about today, basically, should we even do your recurrent training? And we came to the conclusion that we were not going to do it after a long discussion that you and I held, basically, of what's the training benefit of today. If you look at today, we're on the east. This morning we were on the east side of this advancing cold front, which means we have strong winds from the south. Really, 35 knot winds is what we had come through here literally just minutes ago, and big weather system that came through. 35 knot winds. Now the cold front has come through. Now we've got 35 winds coming from the northwest. The winds are shifting, and of course, a big, gigantic line of storms came through. And this is a messy, messy little thunderstorm and complex, I guess you'd say. And whenever this came down, the question was, should we train today? And we decided not to. I'll front load that. But what we decided was it was going to be very, very bumpy up to the front coming, although safe. In other words, we're going to be able to avoid the storms, but very bumpy. And then the storm, when it came through, we were going to have a lot of fast moving storms related to this. And then of course afterwards, well, all the drama's gone, everything moves out, and you end up with this. As a matter of fact, tomorrow's probably going to be one of the most lovely days of the year.
Timing is everything. Yeah, it's going to be
Exactly.
cool and sunny, like a perfect training day.
Exactly. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. So, um, but let's talk about it. And whenever we just were deciding this, we said, hey, what's the training benefit that we could have today? Would it be radar? Could we go out and use the radar that's on your jet prop and go get better at that? And is it worth it with the expected turbulence that's out there? Or should we just reschedule? We decided to reschedule. But one of the things you said was, hey, I wanted to talk about the weather and should I even fly today? And related to this with some other missions that you've had in the past. And you told me about a flight that you had. I don't know how long ago it was, but tell us about that flight where you've flirted with storms.
Yeah, and it's great timing, Joe, because on my mission to talk with you for this flight training was to talk about almost like a system like let's moving through today, because I'm very cognizant of avoiding convective activity. And, everybody knows thunderstorms are not to be messed with, but the devil is always in the details in those. And it can be pretty challenging when faced with weather systems, whether you're going to face convective activity or not. We cover a lot of distance and crossing a front. Sometimes you can cross a front at 27,000 feet and, you're 10,000 feet above anything and it's sunny and great and no problem. And other times it builds up into you and that's no good. And one of the flights that I had recently, which is not my proudest moment, but, it was meaningful because it was on the day of the total solar eclipse. So it was a great day. The total solar eclipse, the path of totality came through much of central kind of the United States. And I decided to take my children out of school that day, and we were going to fly and be in the path of totality. And, my original plan was to stick around Houston and kind of just outside of kind of Houston into the Austin area is where the path of totality was going. But the weather wasn't great in Houston that day. And so we ended up changing and going up really almost into southern Illinois, kind of southern Missouri, northern Tennessee, right in that little area up there, and found a great old Army airport, triangle runways, 8, 10,000 feet long. Had just a wonderful day, saw the path and the totality come through with a bunch of other aviators, all around great day. But then I had to get back into Houston, which put me into possibly crossing that storms that were keeping me out of watching this whole event in Texas. And I made several decisions of which I'm not proud of, kind of looking back on it. I wish I could do it again. Obviously, I did not end up in Manny's report at the convention last week, so that's good, and I'm obviously very thankful for that. But it did highlight to me how you can make some decisions and not realize you're making decisions, or not even realize that you are making those decisions coming in one of those flights. So, the short answer is I was at 22,000 feet. So I was not all the way up at 26,000 based on the direction I was going, and entered, and I went IMC, which is sort of the number one no-no that you're not supposed to do, right? So that now I'm kind of going tactical with the radar, which is probably step number one that I didn't want to do. I did have the radar. I did, have it going. I believe I avoided things. There was another plane that went in front of me. All the telltale signs of how you get into the, sucker hole, if you will, or, just, you walk yourself into it. And listen, I hit convective or pretty turbulent air in there that, I did make some bad decisions. I made some good decisions. The couple of good decisions I made, I told my kids in the back to make sure their seatbelts were on and buckled up tight. I slowed the airplane down, obviously on a jet prop, especially at 22,000 feet. Your ability to cruise past red line is very easy. So I slowed the plane down, had the kids buckle up, went through some turbulent air. I have a G meter in the airplane, so I could watch what the G meter was. We hit just over 2 positive Gs, and not negative, but like a 0.5 G. So that was kind of the span at which it went into. So nothing terrible, but it was probably the most violent I have ever been shook in that aircraft, and it happened very quickly. Autopilot obviously kicked off immediately, and I went into just keep the blue side up and the ground down, and didn't worry about altitude, and generally got through it okay. Got the autopilot back on more or less, but I will admit to you that the thing that really got my attention outside of the kind of violent shaking that I felt in the plane. And by the way, the kids just thought it was funny and laughed in the background. They were just, giggling and thought it was great. But the controller came back on, and I had definitely lost, probably 1,000 feet or up 1,000 feet. I mean, we were going through some thermals. Said, you have altitude deviations, and the words, I will never forget these words: let me know when you have control of your airplane again. And that was the words that came across from the controller, which was like a smack, in the face to me, which was the correct statement. I mean, they were right, because, I wasn't like out of control, like we were in a spiral or anything, but I certainly wasn't maintaining altitude or anything like that. And, kind of had a lot. And as quick as we got into it, in 30 seconds, we're in blue, sunny skies again on the other side, and it's all fine. But it just was like, wow, on reflection of that, how did I end up doing that? Because that was closer to, a bad day in a lot of ways. And how can I never make that mistake again? Because, as a background, I've been flying for 25 years, over 1,000 hours in my logbook, which isn't a tremendous amount, but as a a normal GA guy with almost 500 hours in the jet prop, and never have I sort of experienced quite that of a crossing through front that I made such a decision that sort of I wish I could have done it or done it differently on that day.
Yeah, let me just tell you, one of the things, like you'll hear me preach all the time, avoid a thunderstorm, stay out of thunderstorms, stay 20 miles from thunderstorms. It's easy to say and real hard to do. And the reason why is if you look at the United States, or if you look at our world, there's 30,000 thunderstorms a day that happen over our earth. And a lot of them happen in the United States. We're an area where the thunderstorms are prolific. And and if you also look at a thunderstorm, you've heard the old adage, which is absolutely true, that the energy in a thunderstorm is the same that is on a nuclear bomb that's been dropped than just an average thunderstorm. So we've got to stay out of them because they have all of the threats that are existing. But they happen every day. I mean, they happen
Right.
all the time. Especially if you look at a day like today. If you look at a day, which we're going to look at in just a minute, of would I go flying? And the answer is, would I go flying today? And maybe, maybe not, depending. We'll get into that. But the point is that we fly in airplanes, and if you are simply going to say, "I'll never fly into a thunderstorm," it's easy to say. It's very, very hard to do. And you have some tools in your airplane that will help you stay out of those thunderstorms. And we want to stay out of the area where thunderstorms exist. And your airplane, you also have onboard radar, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is the telltale sign of whether you should or shouldn't get near an area where thunderstorms could be would be, how prolific are you at the onboard radar? My experience tells me that pilots, generally speaking, are very poor at using their onboard radar, and that they understand it very poorly and don't understand the nuances of how to fly and use a radar to avoid it, which means that the onboard radar may not, if they think it's telling them the right data and it's not, then they could fly right into convection, and pilots do it all the time. So it's easy to say just stay out of thunderstorms, but if you look where we live in Texas, I mean, I don't know how many days a year that we have thunderstorm potentials, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was at least half of our days that a thunderstorm could be around. Especially if you consider the afternoons on, virtually every day in our summertime, and anytime a front comes through, and anytime a low pressure system comes through. Anyway, but we're not alone. It's all over I mean, if you look at the weather today, it's over virtually the whole center of the country. I mean, just an enormous, huge weather system. And so, what we've got to do is use all our tools. And some thunderstorms are easy to see, and some are not. So I'm going to go to a radar picture. If you look at the weather system now, there's a huge comma that starts in Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, and with a long, long, long front coming down all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico with thunderstorms that are associated with it. If you look at what's around the western side of Kansas right now, that's an area really easy to see. Just a bunch of thunderstorms that are all big, gigantic line, and you just kind of say to yourself, "No way, I'm just not going to cross those." Or if you look at what is just to the east of Topeka, Kansas, east of Tulsa, Oklahoma, there's a big, gigantic line that's coming through that area right now. And when you see a big, gigantic line that's 50 miles wide, it's best just to say, I'm just going to avoid the entire scenario and just put my airplane on the ground. And it's other times where if you look down in our part of the world, if you look down in Houston, there are definitely thunderstorms that are happening in our part of the world. And if you were to fly a flight out of your part of Houston right now, there are definitely thunderstorms in the area. And the other thing I want to say about it is they're very fast moving thunderstorms. I don't know if you can scroll through. These things are moving at probably 40 knots from the southwest to the northeast, moving very, very rapidly. And what I mean by this is an area where it's a good example that if you were flying with these storms in view, um, if you were flying around these storms, this is where downlinkable radar would do no good whatsoever, other than just,
Mhm.
in other words, the refresh rate of what shows up on your screen is probably 15 minutes old. And 15 minutes when you've got a storm that's moving 40 and maybe even faster than that knots, then whatever you're seeing on the screen is old data that's gone. Today's the day that if you were, especially if you were flying perpendicular to the storm, you would be able to see a storm with your eyeballs to the left if you were flying east, and the downlinkable radar may show that storm to your right,
Right.
simply because 15 minutes ago it was off to the right. Now it's moved off to the left. And so this is where the real radar actually would be a tremendous help to you to be able to see where these are. The other thing that I would say about these storms is none of these storms look particularly terrible. What I mean by that is it's not like these are the storms where, you probably get a half inch of rain and, 15 minutes worth of rain as it passes through. Not terrible storms in our sense of really bad thunderstorms. There's probably no tornadoes in the Houston area today,
Right.
I would say, but they're just a bunch of small storms. But I bet you on my screen, just looking at from on the eastern side of Texas, there's probably 30 or 40 separate storms that have grown along in here. And
And what
sometimes we have a look. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what's always interesting, Joe, and I think you're right, is down in Texas, we always seem to get the tail of the line, right, that's coming through. So as you
Yes,
get into the central part of the United States, it's big, thick, defined system that I think almost makes the decision easier because you're like, oh my gosh, that's 40, 50 miles wide of terribleness. But down in southern Texas, or at least in Houston, we get the sort of this tail effect where you have sort of polka dots of maybe some yellow, occasional reds, individual storms where that decision process gets harder for me as I kind of think through that because
absolutely.
as we were talking earlier, I've seen weather returns like that where you're coming in and everything's gone and clear and you land in sunshine and otherwise it can be pouring rain like it just started outside my window and to the delay. I've always heard about the delay on the radar, so I was watching it today because I was trying to learn, and my house got hit with a storm and it was just you know, pouring rain, wind gusting, terribleness. And on ForeFlight through the downlinkable radar, it still showed the cell about 5 or 6 miles away from where my house was in probably
Yes.
2 or 3 minutes. Yeah. So it was definitely one of those that was like, that's a perfect example. Like, I'm getting hit with the storm, but this shows it's still another, maybe it was 10 miles away, but not here yet. So yes.
Absolutely, and that is exactly a good example of how you cannot use downlinkable radar for what we call tactical. Okay, the idea of tactical mean I'm gonna go fly around these storms. Let me give you a great idea. Literally, as we're talking right now, I've got a client, interestingly, at 30,000 feet in a meridian, which a meridian can be able to go up above
Right.
28,000, and he's one of them that does. So he's flying from Florida to Texas, and so his question is, as he's flying, he's texting me because he has, which is amazing that we live in a time where you can text from there. But he has the Garmin InReach, and so he's able to text. And
Sure.
he's basically saying, "What do you think about me crossing here?" Of course, he didn't call me prior to him taking off, but what do you tell the guy? And here's what I told him. So he's flying perpendicular to the storm from the east to the west, and what I told him was land in somewhere fun like New Orleans on the east side of the storm. Go have dinner. Let the thunderstorm front pass through after your dinner, and then fly home. And let the whole thing pass while you're on the ground. And that is by far the best idea if I had a storm, especially a fast moving front like this. That you just got to let it pass.
Hmm.
And that is by far the safest way to do it. The other way that he's doing, if you look at where we're at, where the cells have good gaps between them, and they're probably they go up in other words where they peak out, but they're fairly there's distance, but like if this is a peak, there's a distance between that and the next cloud. And so what he's going to do is he is going to go to 30,000 feet, fly westbound, and stay visual. Now,
Mhm.
staying visual. So so what you talked about earlier, where you went IMC, another way to say it is you went embedded. Like there can be embedded thunderstorms. So to me, a thunderstorm that is embedded, meaning you're in the cloud, you can't see outside of it. Um, Now you've got real troubles because you better know what you're doing with your radar. So if you're really good at radar and you can go to 30,000 feet, or in your airplane, you have a jet prop, so you could in this flight go westbound at 26,000. Would you be
Right.
able to get over at 26? And the answer is probably not. Could you get over the lowest of it? And the answer is maybe. There might be a gap in there that's big enough for you to get through. But again, there's a big difference between a Meridian and go at 30 and you that could go at 26. And this is a place where what I basically told him was, if you stay at 30,000 and you can't stay visual, turn around, land the airplane, and park it. It's not worth crossing a front with thunderstorms below you. And it's just not worth it. So, but if you were if you were trying to cross the weather up in, I'll make it up in Topeka, Kansas right now, where there's a clear line, anywhere, Kansas City, Kansas, where right now there's a big line. It's 50 miles wide. There's no way you're getting around that storm. The only safe answer is land the airplane, let the front pass, and then move on. If you look at down where we live in Texas, I would call these scattered storms associated with a line. There's clearly a line, but it's not a thick line. I mean, some of them are 5 miles wide at most. So this is an area where if you're able to get over that and be able to see the cells, my guess is that these cells don't get over 30,000 feet. So there's a possibility that he can find a hole and be able to get across, because it's a very, very thin line, and get across. But again, planning wise, this would be a terrible day. Let me give you another illustration. Let's say we were in Houston in Sugar Land and you wanted to go to South Carolina. I would have said, then your time passed earlier and you should have left this morning.
Right. Before he got
And
here.
yeah, before he got here, beat the front out. And now that front has passed, then you got some real troubles, because there's no way to cross that. You're going to have to get up to high altitude to be able to have the potential of crossing the storm, because my only way of doing it would be to stay visual, no embedded IMC thunderstorm line at all. And the whole idea is that you're staying visually the entire time. And most people shouldn't even do that. My point is that this is something that, like, if I had a flight in your airplane, I would consider going up high and seeing where it was, because I'm looking at the cloud tops, and most of the cloud tops are not that high. But these are storms. There's definite convection going on here. So in this case, I would have said, hey, leave early. Now, the flip side of that coin is, if you were in Houston or in Southwest Houston in Sugar Land, and you wanted to go anywhere north to southwest, like you're going to Colorado, and then I would say let the front pass and then go. And we've had two accidents in the last 12 months from pilots that had storms that looked just like this, but they didn't wait long enough. Another 30 minutes of waiting would have been plenty for them to let the front completely pass and then go on their flight, and life would have been good. So the point that I'm making behind this is that it's so easy just to simply say, just fly, don't go near a thunderstorm. The other side of it is you'd never go flying hardly. And in this case, I think you can safely cross this if you have radar and know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're at high altitude in a turbine airplane, not a piston. Piston's not getting over this. And so if you're in a turbine, you have a shot at getting over. Now, no one's going to get on top of a thunderstorm, not even in a big jet, but in something where it's as scattered as these are and as light as these are, there's a chance. So I'm anxious to see what our friend in the Meridian does as far as finding a hole. It's a great discussion for us to have as we're looking at this about how would you get across this? And the answer for most of people is you're simply not. The
Right.
answer for some that are turbine, have onboard radar, know how to use the radar during the day, not the night. This is not a night flight whatsoever. They have those people have a shot at it, but only because they're scattered. Uh, the cells are scattered. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so that this is the yeah. And I will say this: I've got a video that we made about 3 days ago about how to use your radar, and that's coming out. And Gary, you'll be one of the first to see it. So I'm
Perfect. I can't
excited.
wait to see it.
I'm
Yeah.
anxious to let you.
Hopefully we can train to get to practice using the radar, but on a non-turbulent day. We need to just drum up the weather just perfectly so we can have some storms out there, but without moderate turbulence being forecasted. Because I think you were right on the call this morning that it would not have been a fun day to be out there flying.
The rule is anytime you have 20 miles, 20 knot winds at the surface, you know it's going to be turbulent somewhere. You can't get 20 knot winds at the surface without there being turbulence somewhere. And certainly for us, when you do recurrent training, you're doing a lot of low level stuff. So, let me talk one more little bit about these kind of storms. If you were to cross across this line, because they're very widely scattered cells going across a defined line. One of the keys is when you're operating your radar, and you'll see it in my video, but when you're above 20,000 feet, you need to train your radar, and use my fingers to show, you train your radar down so that it paints half scale. Now, what that means is your radar sweeps back and forth on your radar screen, and it'll make sense later, but you paint half the scale and use the 40 mile an hour or the 40 nautical mile scale. And Clint will put a picture up here that'll kind of show you what that looks like. But you would definitely want to train that radar down when you're above 20,000 feet. And the reason why is what you don't want to do is fly along and have a storm grow up into you. So we want to look downwards, painting half scale so that you can see the storms as they see, make sure nothing's growing up into you. I've had that happen one time where I flew a Citation jet from Florida and was flying it back to Texas, and I had the radar on, and I had a cell. Thank goodness it wasn't a big, gigantic thunderstorm, but it was just a small cell, but it grew up into my flight path because I wasn't looking down well enough. And this was probably 15 years ago, but I learned my lesson on that flight because it was very turbulent for about 10 seconds. And then I was out of it and everything was fine. But it was for about 10 seconds, it was just scary as could possibly have been. And that's because I didn't take that radar and train it downwards to paint back and forth, paint half scale. So anyway, I say all that to say, in storms like this, looking down is really, really important. Now, if you're low altitude, you'd look up, and if you're medium altitude, there's another thing you do. But the point is that I hope the pilot that's flying across all this today, number one, I hope he stops and lands and has a nice dinner with his wife and lets everything pass and then continues westbound. But if he doesn't, I hope he does it during the day. I hope he has that radar looking downward. So, yeah.
Joe, does
You
the
know,
new Garmin weather radar that we're kind of hearing more about that does turbulence and is basically automatic, does it help protect against what you were just highlighting? And I think it's the 8000 or the Garmin GX 8000.
GWX 8000.
Okay.
I think it is singularly outstanding in my opinion. It is if you're going to spend money on a new panel today, or if you want to upgrade your airplane to the latest and greatest, it is the GWX 8000. Without a doubt, I highly recommend it. And the reason why, it has an auto feature. And basically, it automatically tilts that radar to the correct down to the correct tilt for the flight conditions where you're at. And if you don't understand radar, and you still want to have radar capabilities, the GWX 8000 is it. Can you adjust, like if you have a RDR 2000, which is probably what you have in your jet prop, meaning
That's correct.
it's a nice 12-inch screen. It's a good radar. There's nothing wrong with it, except there's no auto features whatsoever. That radar, if you know exactly what you're doing, can give you a great image of what's in front of you. The GWX 8000 will provide that screen for you, and it is absolutely worth it, in my opinion, if you're a person that flies a turbine airplane, or if you fly the piston airplane. If you have a Garmin equipped airplane, that you have a Garmin screen that you can put that image on, because it takes all the guesswork out of the tilt of the radar, and just the settings of the radar are all automatically accomplished, and it's just singularly outstanding. So it's one of the bigger advancements that I've seen in the last 10 years. I'd put GPS, noise canceling, ADS-B, downlinkable radar inside there, and that RDR 8000, or that not the RDR, but the GWX 8000. I would put that up there as one of the better things. Interestingly, I had a client of mine that bought an M6, or I bought an M600. This was probably 6 months ago, and that does not come standard on a brand new aircraft. It's like an upgrade that you can get on a brand new one. And asked me, should I get it? And I was like, absolutely, get that without a doubt. The latest, and we simply don't have in today's modern technology the ability to send an exact time radar image to the cockpit. Everything that we have is a composite radar that is picked up by a whole bunch of different radar sites, made into one image, assembled into one image, and then shipped out to the airplane to you. And by the time all that happens, you're usually looking at 10 to 15 minutes. Even if you see a little thing in your screen that says 3 or 4 minutes, that's 3 or 4 minutes since they last sent it. That doesn't mean that they composited all that radar together. I mean, the image could be 15 minutes old. And on a day like today, where you have these unbelievably fast-moving storms, downlinkable radar is virtually useless for anything tactical. If you want to look at a downlinkable image in August in Houston, those are all air mass thunderstorms that aren't moving more than 2 miles an hour. I mean, it can be raining like a dog in your neighbor's yard, and you're not getting absolutely nothing.
That's right.
Today that's not going to be the case. Everybody in Texas is going to get rain today, because the storms are just moving through at 40, 50 miles an hour. And there's just simply no way to use downlinkable radar other than say, I'm avoiding the entire system and land your airplane, which again, I hope my client that's texting me from 30,000 feet is going to land his airplane, go have dinner with his wife, and then continue westbound. But, I'm not flying his airplane, and we'll find out what he does. So
I think, to your point, just in the time we've been talking today, and I've been watching the radar, it's almost moved entirely through Houston now. And in the 30 minutes, that's the window that you're talking about when the storm's moving this fast. It's just time. It doesn't take long.
While I'm on it, there's 2 things that are definitely worth their weight in gold. And that number 1 is to wait for the storm to pass. Just let it get out of the way. It always takes less time than you think. It's less of a penalty than you think. And the other one is, when you need fuel, get fuel. We have too many pilots that are pushing fuel limits because they don't want to land their airplane 100 miles short of their destination, and they're going to land with 30 minutes of fuel, 20 gallons in their turbine or something like that. And it's just not worth it. So those times whenever you let the storm pass is a great thing to wait for. And the other one is get fuel. And if you're going to be low on fuel, get fuel. Those are the 2 things that most of the pilots in our community are loath or slow or don't want to waste the efficiency. I can make it my destination without that fuel, or I can literally, matter of fact, that we had the pilot that flew It was a piston airplane with 5 people on board, took off from a baseball game up in New York and flew back down to Georgia, I think it was. I mean, how do you give him 10, 15 more minutes of time? But literally the front came through. He took off 5 minutes later. And of course, there was one lingering thunderstorm, flew right into it and, killed everybody on board. And, 10 minutes would have been plenty to get through that. But, so letting the thunderstorm, just having your mindset again, it's very easy for somebody to say, just avoid all thunderstorms. It's very difficult in the grand scheme of things. I think the keys takeaways from today is number one, this is a really big weather system. I mean, a huge weather system. And when you see something that big, just respect the system itself. That's thing one. Number two, do your best to stay away from thunderstorms. Do all you can. Number three, if you got onboard radar, learn how to use that thing. Learn what it's all about, and really know what it is. There'll be a video that we have coming out. Should be out in probably a couple weeks, and we'll send it to you, Gary, for a preview. And
All right.
let us know what you think.
Look forward to it.
You bet. All right, Gary. Appreciate you talking with us about your weather experiences, and hopefully today's been a little bit of help. We'll reschedule the training with you, and we'll find a good day for it.
Sounds good.
All right, Joe Casey and Gary Richert with the Malibu Guru podcast signing off.